Hey, hold on a minute. Before you click any buttons or go anywhere, I'm not reviewing an episode from the original Tom and Jerry theatrical shorts. The Tom and Jerry show I'm talking about is the 1975 spin-off, and it requires some history. Trust me, you're going to need some historical knowledge to get where this spin-off came from. Let me try to describe to you this train wreck. Or let me let Wikipedia do it. Here, in a much toned-down, non-violent, Yogi Bear and Boo Boo-esque format, the long popular Tom and Jerry, after years of rivalry, have finally become the best of friends. You know that Tom and Jerry movie that the Nostalgia Critic reviewed and came out like 20 years later? Yeah, well, people who do not understand history are doomed to repeat it. So, let's talk about how this mistake happened. Twice. And believe it or not, this is one of the very few things I really can't blame Hanna-Barbera for in their 70s animation lineup. Throughout this marathon, I don't think I'm going to be saying many nice things about Hanna-Barbera's 70s cartoons because almost all of them are fucking awful and there are so many of them. And we'll get to that when we get to that next time, but this time, it's not their fault whatsoever. Even Hanna-Barbera themselves didn't like this show, and they did not think that this was a good idea. Let's go back to a mystical time before everyone had a television in their bedroom. The year is 1940, and television wouldn't become a common thing to own for another decade. Now, obviously, animation still existed. It existed since the beginning of the century. But how did you get to see it? Well, you just went down to a Nickelodeon. Yeah, you ever wonder where that network got its name? It's not just a random word that they came up with. Before the advent of a television, you'd go to a theater where they'd play animations or short films, and they'd cost a nickel. Or at one point they did. You know, inflation and all that. These theaters were usually frequented by adults, and yes, at one point animation was seen as mostly an adult thing. And I'm talking on Simpsons level. It's not like you couldn't take your kids to them, but they usually weren't made specifically for children, although there are some exceptions. Things like Tom and Jerry slapstick was widely acceptable, as were forms of humor that kids might not get. Fast forward to television. What changes? Well, let's start with the fact that television was originally advertised as a way to keep your kids quiet, and since it was in the home, kids could watch it at any time. On top of that, making animation specifically for television wasn't exactly more expensive, but you'd get far less of a return on your money. You had to cut corners in any way possible, or else you'd end up losing out. You know how some companies ended up guaranteeing returns on their investments? Clutch Cargo literally superimposed lips over still images. Yes, it was a real thing. And yes, it's freaky as all fuck. Basically, only kids were willing to watch this made-for-TV animation, with some exceptions like the Flintstones here and there. And over the next few decades, animation was established as something only for kids, something that you grew out of because it was generally stupid and terrible. And as you know, something that's only for children must have a shit ton of regulations. Parents groups held a lot of power in the 60s, and especially the 70s. Violence was not allowed at all. The rules were very strict. Actually, that's not even half of it. Besides not allowing the cartoons to say the word die or death, they had rules like the complainer is always wrong. They got to the point of attacking individualism. Even conflict was removed from cartoons. Yes, parents essentially wanted every show to be G3 MLP, and this is only one of the problems of 70s animation. And it won't go away into the mid-80s, with toy-based cartoons, believe it or not. People always seem to complain about these cartoons being made to sell toys, and while it's no longer relevant in this day and age without cartoons selling toys, cartoons may have been like they were in the 70s and early 80s, until something like digital distribution came out. They would have been cheap as hell and bland as shit. So yeah, showing the original Tom and Jerry shorts on television was out of the question. And at this time, Hanna-Barbera was not doing very good. They were definitely turning a profit, but their hit series were not as common as they were in the 60s. They had only a couple of 70s shows that lasted more than one season. And what was worse is that they were clearly running out of ideas, and running their franchises like Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones into the ground. I mean, trying to get Tom and Jerry to television like this seems more out of desperation than anything else. I can tell that it's desperation because the episode I found, Castle Wiz, is basically a Scooby-Doo episode with Tom and Jerry, and Tom and Jerry are friends. The plot of this episode is that Tom and Jerry have to spend the night in a haunted castle. Now, unlike that terrible movie that came out in the 90s, Tom and Jerry do not talk in this series. And to the cursory viewer, that may seem like a good idea, but it's not. Without the talking, Tom and Jerry barely are even able to interact. In this episode, there's supposed to be a Scooby-Doo-esque mystery, but because neither of our main characters talk, you don't know until the end. And the Dracula dude reveals that it was all a hoax by himself. Yes, the episode starts with, "My castle is haunted, bwahaha." The episode ends with, "My castle is not haunted, bwahaha." Oh, and speaking of that, there is absolutely no way this haunted castle could be a hoax. In Scooby-Doo, all the villains' monstrous acts can be explained away through conventional means, like film projectors. We see several instances where this kind of stuff cannot be faked, like the magic painting. Also, I'm pretty sure that making this episode a hoax was a last-minute decision for some reason. Dracula even talks to what he calls a film projection. How does running through the castle suddenly lead you outside running into the castle's drawbridge? This episode is poorly put together and lazy. They're reusing music from Scooby-Doo, and they're probably reusing set pieces too. I'm sorry if this review sounds distorted, but this is a Tom and Jerry episode with no slapstick at all, fused with a Scooby-Doo episode with no characters. It's dull as shit. And because Tom and Jerry can't talk for most of the episode, all you hear is a ghost laugh on repeat. It gets grating, and it's fucking annoying. This episode isn't engaging in the slightest. And from what I could tell, kids at the time did not find this engaging in the slightest either. Oh, and apparently Tom and Jerry can talk. They just didn't want to hire fucking voice actors. This is the worst anything related to Tom and Jerry I've ever seen. I mean, even if you can't do slapstick, there are other types of comedy. Yes, this is worse than the Tom and Jerry movie. Hell, I think it's even worse than G3MLP. It is that neutered and that fucking boring. Like I said, this particular episode does the Scooby-Doo shtick, which is a stupid move when your main characters can't talk and can't convey the mystery to the audience. Not that this would be a good mystery anyway. There would be only one suspect. This episode was one of the hardest to talk about yet, because there's so little worth talking about. I'm almost sorry for complaining about vulgar shows being vulgar just to be vulgar. Almost, I haven't gone crazy yet. But my god, people complaining about your cartoons being too censored today are fucking spoiled. With parents groups lobbying to get shit like this on television, we did get a few good educational shows like Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids or Schoolhouse Rock. And while those shows are pretty awesome, and I'll be talking about both at some point, I do not think that it's worth pigeonholing the medium like this. How did we get out of this mess? It's a long and convoluted story that involves both Ronald Reagan and John Kricfalusi. Have fun figuring that one out. Join us next time when I pick a more animated level of bad. Oh yeah, we're going there. Next time, you're gonna join me in the realm of bizarre 70s spin-offs. I'm talking about the Robo Stooges, I'm talking about Josie and the Pussycats in outer space, the Partridge Family in the future, the Flintstones meet the Thing, and a bunch of other crap that sounds like I'm making it up, but I swear I'm not. They actually existed.
I'm so bored, so very, very bored. I'd rather watch a bunch of cupcakes, sing a merry song, and then go surfing on a door. It's so dull, there's nothing to say. I'd rather sugarcoat a leprechaun, feed him to a dog, and then go play some croquet. Where did the bunny